The fourth thing, work for his smile. If I'm going to enslave myself to Christ, I will work for his smile. 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, we are not, Paul wrote, we are not trying to please men, but God. We were not looking for praise from men, not from you or anyone else. Now, I don't know about you, but this is one of my issues. Everybody has his own issues or her own issues. This is one of mine. I remember reading through Galatians years ago, and it was one of those verses that the Holy Spirit used like a 2x4 on my soul. Galatians 1:10, I remember reading it and realizing I have to make a decision. Galatians 1:10, the apostle wrote very personally, he said, am I now trying to win the approval of men or of God? Or am I trying to please men? And then get this, if I were still trying to please men, I would not be a servant of Christ. I feel like paraphrasing that, I would not be a servant of Christ, would I? Do you hear what the Apostle Paul had to decide? Am I going to be a man-pleaser with my life, or am I going to be a Christ-pleaser? That is an important question for every person to ask. It is especially important for every leader to ask. Am I going to be a man-pleaser, or am I going to be a Christ-pleaser? Paul says you can't do both. You cannot be a man-pleaser and be a Christ-pleaser. He said if you're a man-pleaser, then you're not a pleaser of Christ. You have to live for the smile of one. Most leaders who are not followers of Jesus Christ are always trying to figure out where the winds are going. You know, which way is the wind shifting? I want to get in that direction. What do people want? How can I please more people? If I can just get ahead of the pack, if I can just get enough people to like me, if I can get enough people to approve of me, then I'll be a leader. And you watch their leadership and they're shifting this way because the crowd's opinion is shifting that way. And then you'll see their leadership shifting this way. You read the newspaper, follow politics. What's going on? Why do so many people not respect a politician? What's the difference between a statesman and a politician? A statesman makes decisions based on what's right and what's best for the constituency. A politician does what he thinks will get him elected the next time. One is a man-pleaser. The politician is a man-pleaser, always trying to figure out what do people want from me. That's what I'll deliver. As Christian leaders, as servant leaders, we cannot be man-pleasers. We must be Christ-pleasers. It is only in total slavery to Christ that we have total freedom to be servant leaders. No longer are we enslaved to the opinions of other people. Live for an audience of one. And then E, if I'm going to die to myself, I must promote Jesus Christ, not myself. Paul told the Corinthians, I am resolved to know nothing while I was with you except Jesus Christ and Him crucified. We must be all about Him. We must be promoting Jesus Christ with our lives, no matter what our role is in life, as a father, as a mother, as a business leader, as a leader in the church, as an educator. We must always be promoting Jesus Christ, not ourselves. You say, well, how do I know if I'm doing that? This is just one way, but a real practical way of testing ourselves is, do I tell a lot of stories about myself? Am I the hero of every story I tell? You know, love to talk about myself, and I love to make myself look good in every story I tell. You know, if I'm always telling stories about myself and I'm always the hero of my own stories, then I'm promoting myself and I'm not promoting Christ. If I'm going to be a servant leader, thirdly, I must commit myself to serving others. A servant leader is committed to serving others. We serve by our examples, just by how we live. Our lives are a means of serving those that we are leading. Paul told the Corinthians, chapter 11, verse 1, follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. Peter told his fellow elders, 1 Peter 5, eager to serve, not lording it over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock. We actually serve by our lives. Our lives are serving those who are copying us, mimicking us. We also serve others by compassionate, involved ministry in their lives. I love the testimony of the Apostle Paul to the Thessalonians. He said, we loved you so much that we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well, because you had become so dear to us. I must have a genuine willingness to give myself in helping others, even if there's no personal gain. Whenever leaders look at situations, the question that comes to mind is not, what do I have to gain in this? How's this going to benefit me? But how can I help? If our attitude is, okay, what do I have to gain in this? What's in it for me? We'll always be manipulating other people so that we're the gainers. But I think in light of the Scriptures, to be servant leaders, we have to be asking, how can I help? Even if it means sacrificing, even if there is no benefit to me in this, even if there's no residual benefit to me in this, how can I help? Genuine ministry to others. A regular question that must come from the heart of a servant leader is, what can I do for you? I would strongly urge you, there's going to be 4 or 5 things in the seminar that I hope you remember, even if you forget other things. This is one of those memorable questions every leader should ask as a lifestyle. What can I do for you? And this gets very practical, and some of us men in the room are married. I'd say about half of us in this room are married men. For those of us that are married men, I think to ask our wives on a regular basis, what can I do for you? And not go bossing our wives around thinking, well, I'm a real hotshot leader here. I'm bossing my wife around. That's not biblical leadership. A servant leader, the kind of husband who models Jesus Christ, will regularly ask his wife, honey, what can I do for you today? How can I help you today? Even to your children, how can I help you today? For those of you that are parents, how are your kids going to learn how to be servants? Not by serving you. I'll teach them to be servants. They'll practice on me. They'll serve me. Oh, no. If you want to teach your kids to be servants, model it. Show them. In any relationship you are in, that you are asking people, what can I do for you? For those of you that are bosses, employers, supervisors, to ask the people who work for you, what can I do for you today? How can I help you today? In the church, you're leading someone, what can I do for you today? Ken Blanchard wrote, leaders who are servants first will assume leadership only if they see it's the best way they can serve. They're called to lead rather than driven because they naturally want to be helpful. A servant leader wants to be helpful. From his book, Spiritual Leadership, J. Oswald Sanders, not the number of one's servants, but the number whom one serves is the criterion of greatness and the real preparation for leadership. So the conclusion of servant leadership, that conviction, what we're getting at here is if I'm going to be a leader, a biblical leader, what's my conviction about leadership? What do I really think? What do I really feel? What's my passion about leadership? Is my passion, my conviction, that I must be a servant leader? Well, then here's the conclusion of the matter. If you're a leader, then lead. Romans 12:8, if a person's gift is in leadership, let him govern diligently. George Barna wrote, I think he wrote it well, if God has called you to lead, let nothing stand in the way of the privilege you have to serve Him and to serve His people through applying the gift, the resources, and the opportunity He has provided for you. You are among a special group of people who have been identified by Him for a challenging but rewarding task. My hunch is if you took the time and the effort to come to the Leadership Academy, you probably are willing to serve as a leader. But occasionally I'll see someone who I believe is gifted in leadership but holding back. And I want to say, God gave you that gift for a reason. God gave you that gift of leadership for a reason. He wants you to use it for His glory. He wants you to use that gift for the benefit of His people. Don't sit on it. If you're gifted in leadership, then lead. But if you're going to lead, be a servant leader. Be a servant leader. Have the conviction that you are called to serve others by your ministry of leadership. Be motivated with a loving concern for Christ and His people, not out of a desire for self-gratification or self-promotion. There was a book that I'd heard about for years, and a few years ago, presenting the Leadership Academy, a couple of the guys in that presentation found this book for me. It's actually written by a Salvation Army leader from 2 generations ago, Samuel Brengle. Samuel Brengle wrote a book called The Soul Winner's Secret. It's a powerful little book, and in that book he wrote this. Servant leadership, is not won by promotion, but by many prayers and tears. It is attained by confessions of sin and much heart-searching and humbling before God, by self-surrender, a courageous sacrifice of every idol, a bold, deathless, uncompromising and uncomplaining embracing of the cross, and an eternal, unfaltering looking unto Jesus crucified. It is not gained by seeking great things for ourselves, but rather, like Paul, by counting those things that are gained to us as a loss for Christ. That is a great price, but it must be unflinchingly paid by him who would not be merely a nominal, but a real spiritual leader of men, and a leader whose power is recognized and felt in heaven, on earth, and in hell. My friends, that is powerful. And it was written by a man who lived that. That if you are going to be a leader, be a servant leader. Being a servant leader will cost you. It'll mean that you live a life embracing the cross. You will live a life embracing the cross, saying, Lord, even if living as a leader is painful to me, even if it is costly to me, if that is how you've gifted me, if that is what you've called me to, then, Lord, let me do it for that smile on your face. I am willing to die to myself, to live for Christ. Lord, help me to be a servant leader. If you want to learn more about servant leadership, Chuck Swindoll actually wrote a good book called Improving Your Serve. Been around for 20 years or more. But in that book, he has this poem. I don't know if he wrote it or if someone else wrote it, but let me just quote to you this poem that Chuck Swindoll includes in his book, Improving Your Serve. Very personally, I am like James and John, those sons of Zebedee, those ones who wanted to sit at the right and the left. I'm like James and John. Lord, I size up other people in terms of what they can do for me, how they can further my program, feed my ego, satisfy my needs, give me strategic advantage. I exploit people, ostensibly for your sake, but really for my own sake. Lord, I turn to you to get the inside track, to obtain special favors, your direction for my schemes, your power for my projects, your sanction for my ambitions, your blank check for whatever I want. I am like James and John. Lord, change me. Make me a man who asks of you and of others, what can I do for you? That night in the upper room, John 13 ends with this: now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. We are called, my friends, to servant leadership. That must be the conviction of our heart. That must be what motivates us to serve, to lead, that we will be servant leaders. Not to get other people to serve us, but that we might serve others.